Did you know? The very first military expedition in Islamic history ended without a single drop of blood. No swords were drawn. No battlefield cries echoed across the desert. No warriors fell. And yet, this quiet journey would change everything. Because history is not always written by the battles we remember. Sometimes, it is shaped by the decisions made when nothing happens. This is the story of Waddan, a moment so silent, most people would overlook it. But without it, everything that came after might never have existed. The year is 623 CE. The city of Medina stands beneath the burning sun. From a distance, it looks calm, peaceful even, but beneath that surface, there is tension, because what exists here is not a powerful state. It is something fragile, a community trying to rebuild after losing everything. Just 1 year earlier, they left Makkah, not as travelers, not as merchants, but as people forced out. Their homes were taken, their wealth confiscated, their status destroyed. Families were separated, lives were dismantled, and when they arrived in Medina, they arrived with almost nothing. No armies, no resources, no dominance, only belief and the will to survive. At first, survival is enough. Finding food, building shelter, creating some sense of stability. But survival has a limit. Because survival does not remove the threat. Let us begin the journey. It only delays it. Makkah still exists. Quraysh still holds power. And that power is growing. So the question becomes, do you wait for the threat to return? Or do you act? Before it does, this is where most leaders fail. They react. They wait. They hope. But strategy requires something different. It requires moving before the danger arrives. Most people think power comes from armies, from numbers, from weapons, but that is only the surface. Because real power is sustained by something deeper. In Makkah, that power came from trade, caravans moving across vast desert routes, connecting cities, markets, and tribes. Goods flowed, money flowed, influence expanded. These trade routes were not just roads, they were lifelines. And if you control the lifelines, you control the system. Muhammad understood this, and that understanding changed everything. Instead of marching toward Makkah, he chose a different path, a smarter path. He targeted the system, not the surface. The routes, the movement, the economy behind the power. Because if you weaken the system, you weaken the enemy, without even fighting him. This was not war. Not yet. This was positioning. Every strategy begins with a first step. For this one, that step was Waddan, a location along the coastal trade route. Not a battlefield, not a fortress, just a point within a much larger network. But sometimes, the smallest points are the most important. Around 70 men were gathered. Not a large army, not a powerful force, just 70. But these were not ordinary men. They were people who had already lost everything. And when you lose everything once, fear begins to lose its power. They were not fighting to protect what they had. They were moving forward, because they had no other choice. They left Medina quietly. No celebration, no announcement, just movement across a harsh, unforgiving desert. The heat was relentless. The silence was heavy. Every step forward was a step into uncertainty. Would they find the caravan? Would the plan succeed? Or would this become another loss? No one knew, but they kept moving. And then, they arrived. Waddan, the destination, the moment they had been moving toward. But something was wrong. There was no caravan, no enemy, no confrontation, only silence, endless, empty silence. For many, this would feel like failure, a wasted effort, a mission that led nowhere. But in reality, this was the most important moment. Because when nothing happens, leaders reveal how they think. At Waddan, they did not find their enemy. They found something else. An opportunity. A local tribe, Banu Damra, positioned along these routes, connected to the same network that powered Quraysh. And in that moment, everything changed. Because now, the question was no longer about battle. It was about choice. Most leaders would choose force, show strength, assert dominance, create fear. But Muhammad chose something different. He chose negotiation, understanding, strategy. Because real power is not just the ability to fight. It is the ability to influence. A treaty was formed. Simple, clear, no war between them. No betrayal, mutual support if needed. But behind those simple words was a powerful shift. Because this was not just peace. This was positioning. With this agreement, something invisible began to form. Influence, reach, presence. Muhammad was no longer limited to Medina. He was extending outward, along the very routes that sustained his enemy. Step by step, he was building a network, not through war, but through connection. This was a different kind of power. Not loud, not obvious, but incredibly effective. Because instead of attacking Makkah, he was surrounding it, quietly, strategically, without them even realizing, even without a battle. A message had been sent. A clear one. We are no longer weak. We are no longer running. We are no longer just surviving. We are acting. And that message began to spread. After Waddan, things began to change. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly and inevitably. The tribes started watching, observing, reconsidering, because something new was forming. And in Makkah, Quraysh began to notice. At first, it seemed small, insignificant. But strategy is not about size. It is about direction. And the direction was clear. Something was building. This was no longer just a group of displaced people. They were becoming something else. A force. Not defined by numbers, but by strategy, by movement, by intention. Waddan was not a battle. It was not a victory in the traditional sense. But it was something far more important. It was the beginning, the first move, in a much larger game. Because from this point forward, everything would change. More expeditions, more alliances, more pressure, and eventually, real battles. But all of it traces back to this moment. Waddan ended without blood, without violence, without a clear victory. But history does not measure impact by noise. It measures it by consequence. And the consequence of Waddan was enormous, because it marked the moment when survival turned into strategy, when weakness began to transform into power, when a quiet decision set the stage for everything that followed. Waddan was not the end of anything. It was the beginning